We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Beis and Aleph and Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 22a. And the previous Amud, the Gemara brought up the laning on Rosh Chodesh. Gemara said, how do you divide it up among the psukim? How do you make 4 aliyahs? So the Gemara suggested maybe the first section, it's 8 psukim total. You'll divide it up into 2 aliyahs, 4 and 4. But then the problem is, what are you going to do with the second section, which starts with Yom HaShabbos? The paragraph of Yom HaShabbos is just 2 psukim. So if you're going to read the 2 psukim from there and 1 pasuk from the next to Uv Rashi Chodshechem, read that first pasuk to get your 3 psukim for the third aliyah, that's a problem because the halach is, Ein maschilin v'parsha, pachas mishlosh psukim. You can't start a parsha and read less than 3 psukim. Now you're starting Uv Rashi Chodshechem, just reading 1 of those psukim. So that wouldn't be a good solution either. So the Gemara says, Likri trei meho telasa mehach. So then you'll suggest read the 2 psukim from Uvayom HaShabbos, and then read 3 psukim from Uvarash Chodshechem. But that's a problem also. Pashulu trei, like we said before, you're not supposed to leave just 2 psukim left at the end of the parsha. So the question was, what should you do? So Amar Lo, so he said back to him, Zulo Shamati. He said this particular question when it comes to Rosh Chodesh, how to divide it up, I didn't hear this question. However, Kayotze Bo Shamati. However, I did hear a similar question as follows. I heard the question in the following way. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, this is the Mishnah Meseches Tainus. The Mishnah says, B'yom Harishon, this is talking about when they did the Ma'amados, this was when they had the gatherings in order to fast and to pray for the rain. So it says on the first day they would read Bereshis Vayhi Rakia. They would read it, they would start from Bereshis and they would read the Psukim of Bereshis and Vayhi Rakia. V'tani Alon, we learned in a Braisa on that Mishnah, Bereshis B'shnayim, they would read Bereshis, they would divide it among 2 people. And Yehi Rakia B'echad, Yehi Rakia would be 1 aliyah. We asked on that as follows. I understand you could do Yehi Rakia as 1 aliyah. The Tlasa Psukei Have, Yehi Rakia is actually a total of 3 psukim. Ela Bereshis B'shnayim, but you're going to divide up the psukim of Bereshis into 2 aliyahs. Chamisha Psukei Have, that's just 5 psukim. V'tanya, we learned in a Braisa, Hakori B'Torah L'Yivchos Mishlosh Psukim. When you read from the Torah, it can't be less than 3 psukim. Well, if you have 5 psukim total, divided up among 2 aliyahs, one of those aliyahs, it's only going to be 2 psukim. So it's a very similar kind of question. V'yitmar Allah, and it was learned on there, Machlokas Amoraim, what do you do? Rav Amar Doleg. And Rav said what you do is Doleg. Now Rashi over here explains Doleg means Hasheni Chozru Maschil Pasuk Shagamar Bo Lefanav, meaning the second aliyah repeats the last pasuk of the aliyah right before it. That's Rav's opinion. Ushmuel Amar Posek, and Shmuel says no, you can actually take a pasuk and you can cut it in half. Rashi over here says, Posek Arishon Kore Chatzia Pasuk Ashlishi Uposko. Take that third pasuk from the first aliyah, cut it in half, make it into 2 psukim, and that's your solution. And the Gemara says, Rav Amar Doleg, my time alone, Amar Posek. Now Rav, who says you repeat a pasuk, why doesn't he say you cut a pasuk in half? Very simple. Kasavar, because he holds. Kol psuka de lo paske Moshe, non lo paskinon le. Any pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't cut it in half in the Torah, if it's a whole pasuk in the Torah itself, we can't cut it in half. But the Gemara continues, Ushmuel Amar paskinon le. Does Shmuel really say you can cut a pasuk in half that was not cut in half in the actual Torah? V'yomer Reb Chananya Kra, but Reb Chananya, who was an expert in psukim, he used to say as follows: Tsar Gadol Haya Lietz Rabbi Chanina Hagadol. It was a great difficulty by me, by Rabbi Chanina Hagadol. V'lo hitter li livsok ela l'tinok shel beis rabban. He only allowed me to do psukim in half in a situation where you were teaching school children. Hoelu l'slamin asuyim, because in that case, the reason why we were only reading part of the pasuk was for teaching purposes. But other than that, you're not allowed to do it. So it seems like you're not allowed to do it. So how could Shmuel say that when we're reading from the Torah, you're allowed to cut a pasuk in half? So the Gemara says, no, Hasam time and Mishum Delo Efshar. Over there, what was the reason why they allowed it? There was no other possibility in terms of teaching the children. It was impossible otherwise. Hachanami Lo Efshar. Here also, it's not possible. Otherwise, the only way to lane from these psukim is to cut the pasuk in half. So Shmuel allows it. The Gemara says, Shmuel Amar Posek, my time Amar Doleg. But Shmuel, who says you cut the pasuk in half, why doesn't he say Rav's solution? Why doesn't he say that you repeat a pasuk? And the Gemara answers very simply, Gezerah misham hanechnasin u'misham hayotzin. That's a decree because people who are going to come in late or people who are going to leave early, so it's going to look like you didn't read from the proper amount of psukim. If you repeat a pasuk, people are going to say, oh, so the second aliyah had 3 psukim, the first must have only had 2, or vice versa. So that's already going to be a problem. So Shmuel says you're better off that you should just cut the pasuk in half, and people won't get confused. They'll understand you need to have at least 3 psukim for every aliyah. The Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following Braisa, Parsha shel Shisha psukim. Let's say you have a parsha that's 6 psukim long. Koronos Avashnaim, you can divide it up among 2 aliyahs, 3 and 3, no problem. V'shel Chamisha psukim, but let's say it's 5 psukim long, so b'yachid it can only be 1 aliyah. Kara Rishon Shlosha. Let's say the first person reads 3 psukim. Hasheni Kore Shnayim mi Parsha Zu. The second person can read 2 from this parsha. V'echon mi Parsha Acheres. And he should read 1 pasuk from the next parsha. V'yesh omrim Shlosha. And some people say, no, once you're already starting the next parsha, you should read 3 psukim from that parsha. Lefi she'ein maschilin b'parsha pachos mi Shlosha psukim. Because you're not allowed to start a parsha and read less than 3 psukim. So the Gemara now says, via Misa, if it's really true what Rav and Shmuel say, that you can either repeat a pasuk or you can cut a pasuk in half. So Laman Damar Doleg Nidlog, according to the one who says you can repeat a pasuk, if you have 5 psukim in a parsha, in one paragraph, so then you should be able to have 2 aliyahs, just repeat a pasuk. Well, Laman Damar Posuk, and according to the one who says you can split a pasuk in half, Nifsok, let's just split a pasuk in half. What is this Brisa talking about over here? That when you have 5 psukim, so then you have to do 3, and then you have to go into the next parsha? You could do one of the solutions of Rav and Shmuel. And so the Gemara answers, no, Shani Hasam, it's different over there. In that particular case, in the Brisa, there was a possibility to do what the Brisa suggested. There was a possibility to go into the next parsha. If that's already possible, so then you should do that. Even Rav and Shmuel would both agree you should not resort to their solutions unless there's no other possibility. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Tanchem, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Tanchem says in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Halacha ki yesh omrim. The halacha is like the yesh omrim, that once you start a parsha, you should read at least 3 psukim from that parsha. V'yamar Rabbi Tanchem, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and Rabbi Tanchem says in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Kshem shein maschilin v'parsha pachos migimel psukim. Just like you can't start a parsha and read less than 3 psukim, kach ein mishayrin v'parsha pachos mishlosha psukim. We also don't leave over in a parsha less than 3 psukim. You shouldn't stop an aliyah less than 3 psukim away from the end of the parsha. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? Hashta, now that you're saying, Umas Chalta, the Kamekel Tanakama, if when it comes to beginning a parsha, there you have a possibility of leniency. We see that Tanakama is lenient. Machmiri Yeshomrim, so the Yeshomrim there are strict. So Shiur, so when it comes to leaving over Psukim at the end, the Machmir Tanakama, clearly the Tanakama was Machmir in that situation. Lokal Shekei the Machmiri Yeshomrim, of course everybody's going to be Machmir. In other words, even the Tanakama was Machmir when it came to leaving off Psukim at the end. So of course everyone's going to be Machmir. As Rashi over here explains, Shiur the Machmir Tanakama, when it comes to leaving off Psukim at the end, so the Tanakama is Machmir, the Tani v'shel chamisha b'yachid, because really the Brisa said that if you have a paragraph of 5 psukim, it should all be 1 aliyah. You really shouldn't read 3 and leave over 2 at the end. We don't say that the first aliyah should read 3 and stop if he wants to. It's not what we said. It said in the Brisa over there that if it's 5 psukim, so then you should really have it be 1 aliyah. Then the Brisa went on to say that if the first person read 3 and stopped, so then the second person reads 2 from this parsha and goes into the next parsha. But really, if it's a parsha 5 psukim, it's supposed to all be 1 aliyah. Even the Tanakam was machmir. So of course the Yesh Omrim is going to be machmir as well. And so the Gemara says, no, ma'u detema, what might you have thought? Nichnosin shchichi yotzin lo shchichi. You say when people come in late, that's very common. But people leaving early, that's not so common. The manchi sefer Torah v'nafki, that people would leave the sefer Torah while they're still reading from it and leave. And so therefore you would say, since it's not so common for someone to leave early, it's not the biggest deal if you leave over less than 3 psukim. People aren't going to leave early, and they're going to see that when you read from the next 2 psukim, you're going to go into the next parsha. So Kamash when it comes to teach us, no, that when it comes to that case as well, again, you're not supposed to leave over less than 3 psukim to the end of a parsha. And the Gemara continues, V'tanakama ma'ishna shiurei delo misham yotzin. But 1 second, what's the pshat in the Tanakama? Why is it by the Tanakama that you don't leave over less than 3 psukim? Because people might leave early, they're going to get confused. So aschulei nami. So when you start a parsha as well, it should be the same issue. Gezerah misham anichnasin. We should make a decree. Someone comes in late, they're going to think that there was an aliyah proceeding that was less than 3 psukim. And so the Gemara says, no, Amri, the answer is follows, Man da'ayil shiyule shayil. Somebody who comes in late already, so that person's going to ask what's going on. He'll clarify the situation. He will not get confused. And the Gemara says, Shalach le Rav abrei de Rav Rav Yosef. Rabba, the son of Rava, sent to Rav Yosef the following, Hilchas amai, what is the halacha over here? Shalach le, he sent to him, Hilchas the halacha is doleg, that you should in fact repeat a pasuk. In other words, that was a solution. We had either you repeat a pasuk or you cut a pasuk in half. He says the halacha is you should repeat a pasuk, ve'emtsoi dolgan, and it's the pasuk in the middle that should be repeated. As Rashi over here explains, ve'emtsoi doleg, it's the middle person who repeats the pasuk, shem lo yidlaghu, because if he doesn't do the repeating, let's say you leave the repeating for the last aliyah, so you hate sarach l'shayir beparsha pachos mishlosha psukim. Bach changes lahaschel to l'shayir. Then he's going to need to leave off at the end of the parsha less than 3 psukim. V'im yikra shlosha min ashniya, and if he's going to go ahead and read into the next parsha, read 3 psukim, nimtza korakula, comes out that he's going to end up reading the entire thing. So the best solution is to have the middle reader again repeat a pasuk. The Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said zahaklal kol sheyesh bo musaf v'chulu. It said the rule anytime there's musaf but it's not a yontif, so you're going to have 4 aliyahs. So the Gemara says, they had the following question. Tainis Tzibor Bekama. What about on a public fast day? How many aliyahs are there on a Tainis Tzibor? Rosh Chodesh Umoed Dika Carbon Musaf Arba. On Rosh Chodesh and Chol Moed, again, there's a carbon musaf, so you have 4 aliyahs. Aval Hacha Deleka carbon musaf lo, but here there's no carbon musaf, so you don't have 4 aliyahs, it's just going to be 3. O Dilmor, maybe we'll say, Hachanami Ikom Musaf Tefillah. Here also there's an addition to the Tefillah, because we're adding on Anenu, it's like an extra bracha, and therefore maybe we should say as well there should be 4 aliyahs. So the Gemara says, Tashma, coming here to the following proof. It says on Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed you have 4 aliyahs. So it seems to be that on a Tainis Tzibor it would only be 3, otherwise it would be mentioned as well. So the Gemara says that's not a proof. Let's look at the beginning of the Mishnah. It says Monday, Thursday, Shabbos, Mincha, you have 3 aliyahs. Tainis Tzibor is not listed there also. You can imply that that would be with 4 aliyahs. So the Gemara says from this Mishnah you really can't prove it. They leave out Tainis Tzibor in all situations. So the Gemara says, Tashma, coming here, the following proof. The Rav Ikla LeBavel b'Tainis Tzibor. Rav went to Bavel and it was a public fast day. Kam Kra b'Sifra, Pasach Baruch Chasim, Velo Baruch. So when he got up to read from the Sefer Torah, when he opened the Sefer Torah, he made a bracha. But when he finished, he didn't make a bracha. So Nafal Kuli Alma Anpayu. Then everybody, they fell on their faces, they did Tachanon. Rav lo Nafal Alape. And Rav, he didn't say Tachanon. And so the Gemara now says, let's analyze this case. Michli, let us see. Rav be Yisrael Kara. Rav was the one, he would be called up as Yisrael. He was a Yisrael, so he would get the 3rd aliyah. So my time, a chasim v'lo baruch. So why would he finish up and not make a bracha at the end? Lav mishum the boy lemikri achrina basrei. Obviously, Rav understood there was going to be a 4th aliyah. Rav was being called up from the 3rd aliyah, and when he opened up the Sefer Torah and made a bracha, when he finished, he didn't make a bracha because he understood there are 4 aliyahs when it comes to Tainis Tzibor. So the Gemara says that's not true. Lo no, Rav bekahani kora. Rav was actually called up in the spot of Kohen. Dehar Rav Huna kari bekahani, because Rav Huna also he was called up in the place of the Kohen, and so Rav also was going to be called up as a Kohen. So the Gemara says, 1 second, Bishlama Rav Huna kari bekahani. I understand Rav Huna that he was called up in the first aliyah as a Kohen. Dohafilu Rav Ami Rav Asi, because even Rav Ami and Rav Asi to kahani chashivi dar Yisrael, they were important kohanim in the land of Eretz Yisrael. Make of kaifilu, yet they humbled themselves in front of Rav Huna. They considered him to be like their Rebbe. Kaifilei Rav Huna, they put themselves in a position of humility in front of Rav Huna. El Rabba, when it comes to Rav, ha'ika Shmuel to kahana have. But Shmuel lived over there in the same area, and he was a Kohen. V'daber aleh, and the custom even was that Shmuel had a higher position than Rav. So why would Rav get the aliyah of Kohen if Shmuel was present, and Shmuel was not considered a subordinate to Rav? And so the Gemara says, no, Shmuel nami mekef havachayef leila Rav. Shmuel also was really subordinate to Rav. V'Rav hu David leikavod. It's just that Rav gave him a certain amount of honor. As Rashi over here says, V'Rav hu David lahaida dabre oleh kavod hava avid le mishum delaite Rav l'Shmuel. There was an incident where Rav once cursed Shmuel, and therefore he felt he had to give him a certain position of honor to speak in front of the community. Delo lukmei bani b'Meseches Shabbos b'Perek Shmona Shratzim. He cursed him not to have children. That's in Meseches Shabbos, and therefore for that reason Rav gave a certain kavod to Shmuel because of what he did. He felt what he did was wrong, but in reality Shmuel was really subordinate to Rav. As the Gemara continues, V'chiyavid le b'fanav. This was only true b'fanav. He only gave him this kavod when he was in front of him. Shelo b'fanav lo avid le. If he wasn't in front of him, he didn't do it. If Shmuel wasn't Nahardai and he wasn't where Rav was, so in that situation, Rav would not give this kavod, so to speak, to Shmuel, and Rav could take the aliyah of Kohen. And the Gemara says, Hachinami mistaber the Rav b'kahani kra. It actually makes sense to say that Rav got the aliyah of Kohen. Because if he was called up as Yisrael, so lefanam my time of baruch. Why would he make a bracha before the aliyah? If you're called up for the 3rd aliyah, you don't make a bracha, like we said in the Mishnah. Only the first aliyah makes a bracha at the beginning, and the last aliyah makes a bracha at the end. So it has to be that he was called up as in the bracha of Kohen. So the Gemara says, no, we can answer that lachar takana. This was after the takana, where they said everyone makes a bracha before and after. So that's why even the 3rd aliyah would get a bracha before. But the Gemara says, if so, if that was the case, if every aliyah is making a bracha before and after, he should have made a bracha at the end. That doesn't really answer the question. And so the Gemara says, Shani heicha di Yosef Rav. No, it's different in the area where Rav was, when Rav was present. Demei alayli, because people would come into the shul, and the point is they would never leave early because of the honor of Rav. So you would never have that situation where people would get confused. Let's say Rav wouldn't say the final bracha if there was another aliyah. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis.